This story will break your heart, and you won't believe how it ends. Stay until the end and enjoy the story. I stayed, even when I wanted to leave. I used to believe that staying was a sign of strength, that real men don't walk away, that commitment means endurance, even when you are slowly breaking inside. That belief shaped years of my life. From the outside, everything looked stable. A marriage, a home, a predictable routine, something people respected. But stability and fulfillment are not the same thing. And I learned that too late. At first, the distance was subtle, not cold, not hostile, just quiet. We still talked. We still shared meals. We still lived in the same space. But something essential was missing. Not love exactly, presence. Being in the same room is not the same as being emotionally available. And slowly, without noticing, we stopped being truly present for each other. I stopped bringing up things that bothered me, not because they didn't matter, but because every attempt felt exhausting. Explaining myself started to feel heavier than staying silent. So, I chose silence. Silence is dangerous. It feels peaceful on the surface, but underneath, it becomes storage for resentment, disappointment, and unmet needs. At first, I told myself it was temporary, that things would get better when work slowed down, when stress eased, when life became less complicated. But life rarely becomes less complicated. It only changes shape. Weeks became months. Months became years. I adapted. Not in a healthy way, in a survival way. I learned how to lower my expectations, how to accept emotional distance as normal, how to convince myself that wanting more was immature or unrealistic. I told myself that wanting connection was weakness, that needing emotional intimacy was something you grow out of. That was a lie I learned to live with. We didn't fight much. People think that means a relationship is healthy. Sometimes it means something else. Sometimes it means both people have stopped trying to change anything, stopped asking for more, stopped believing things can improve. That kind of calm is not peace. It's surrender. I began to feel like a background character in my own life. Present, but not essential. Involved, but not emotionally invested. I showed up. I did what was expected. I fulfilled my responsibilities. But I stopped dreaming. Not because I had no dreams, but because dreaming made me aware of how unfulfilled I felt. Awareness was painful, so I avoided it. Avoidance became my coping mechanism. Whenever something felt emotionally uncomfortable, I distracted myself. Work, screens, noise, busy schedules, anything to avoid sitting with my own thoughts. Because when I was alone with my thoughts, I had to face an uncomfortable truth. I wasn't happy, not miserable, not dramatic, just empty. Emotional emptiness is harder to explain than pain. Pain has a shape. Emptiness feels like nothing. And that's what makes it dangerous. Nothing to fix, nothing to fight, just a quiet absence of meaning. I started to confuse loyalty with self-neglect. I told myself staying was noble, that sacrificing my emotional needs was the mature thing to do. But maturity doesn't mean self-erasure. I didn't realize that at the time. I became skilled at pretending I was fine. So skilled that even I believed it most days. That's the scariest part of long-term emotional suppression. You stop knowing what you actually feel. You stop trusting your own dissatisfaction. You start thinking, maybe this is just how life is. Flat, predictable, emotionally quiet. I watched other people talk about passion, connection, excitement, and I told myself that was for younger people, for unrealistic people. I convinced myself that emotional fulfillment was optional, that responsibility mattered more. But responsibility without emotional life becomes a cage, not a structure. I wasn't angry at my wife. That would have been easier. Anger gives you energy. Anger gives you direction. What I felt was worse. Indifference. Not toward her, toward myself. I stopped asking what I wanted, stopped imagining different outcomes, stopped considering change. Because change meant admitting I was unhappy, and admitting that meant making decisions. Decisions scared me more than emptiness. I stayed because staying was familiar. Leaving meant uncertainty, and uncertainty felt more dangerous than quiet misery. I told myself stories to justify it, that things weren't that bad, that other people had it worse, that I should be grateful. Gratitude can become a weapon against yourself if you use it to silence your own emotional truth. I wasn't ungrateful. I was unfulfilled. There's a difference. Years passed like that, not dramatically, not explosively, just quietly. I became a man who knew how to function without feeling, how to perform life instead of live it. I stopped expecting to be understood. I stopped expecting to feel deeply connected. I told myself this was adulthood, but adulthood doesn't mean emotional death. It means emotional responsibility. And I wasn't taking responsibility for my inner life. By the time I realized how disconnected I felt, the numbness had already become my normal. That's the most dangerous part. When numbness feels normal, you stop noticing how much of yourself you've lost. I wasn't trapped. That's the truth I didn't want to face. I was choosing comfort over authenticity, stability over honesty, familiar pain over uncertain growth. And that choice slowly erased parts of me. By the end of this phase of my life, I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't broken in a visible way. I was just tired. Tired of carrying a version of myself that didn't feel real. Tired of living a life that looked right but felt wrong. I told myself I could do this forever. That was the lie. But that was only the beginning. Stay tuned for more stories.